So it's just some feedback that's just come through from Hardy about Alia. He said that being 14 and a devout Muslim, he was very nervous about how much interaction he could achieve with Alia. Her work is highly religious, and yet once when they started speaking, with great support from Alexis and Ruth, he started to see the depth of her passion. Again, as a religious poet, he directed her towards Milton and Paradise Lost. Some of her poetry reminded me of dub poetry, and she was found some Zephaniah to read and some Adrian Mitchell. She writes in 3 distinct styles, poetic prose, poetry and story, and he set her a task of writing the same story in these 3 different forms. On Grace, Grace is 18 and she's from Slough. Prior to meeting Grace, he was very impressed with her writing samples, the ones that she submitted with her application. She clearly has talent, is older, she would be more able to deal with a wider breadth of influences. She's already fulfilled his initial writing task effectively and well. They spoke a great deal about poetry and prose, and has set Grace certain tasks involving reading some John Milton and Vikram Seth's first book, which was written in verse. And he has asked her to rework her piece Under Nightwood. As a summary, he feels humbled and honoured to have met these young writers. They both clearly have talent and an appetite to learn, and he too feels that he's grown and developed in meeting and talking to them. It's just brilliant, it's great. What have you learnt so far from meeting, from the mentoring?
Well, we've sort of echoed them already. It's just bowled over by their background, their potential, and they packed so much into their short lives. Writing-wise, they really have. Very mature, as you just said. Exceedingly. It's interesting how I did mention his perception of this young Muslim woman. Can you see, he had different perceptions of her until he got to know her.
Ruth, you went along.
You could see he was a bit.
Because
how am I going to, because he's obviously, as a person, he's very open, very, like this, and she was incredibly reserved. She wouldn't look him in the eye, or shake hands or anything like that. So I think immediately he thought, how am I going to, make a connection here, really? And she is. As he says, she is religious. She is polemical. She writes about racism and war. Those are the things she really wants to write about from her perspective as a young Muslim girl. And so he obviously also had some issues with that as well. In terms of the religion side of it. But then he thought, actually the point here is that I'm here as her mentor. I'm going to have that conversation, and my job is to encourage her, support her in doing that, but also to open up other ways of looking at stuff, in terms of her writing and approaches that she could be taking to get what she wants is to be able to get her message across more effectively. And so she sees part of the role of Hardy's role is to help her do that. That's what she wants to do. She's quite definite about it. That's what she wants him to do for her in terms of
that's what she
her
said
writer.
in her initial before we met all the young people, we sent them a questionnaire asking them various questions about their reading and their writing and what do they want to get out of the project. And I remember Alia saying that she wants to use her mentor to kind of learn skills, how to give the right message with half the words. And she also wants to use the project to kind of talk about Islamic values and issues that are not being portrayed in the media. And I think obviously linking to the Islamophobia angle of things. And I think that's where I think she's emailed me to tell me what she wants to work on, and I think the 2 themes are going to be war and racism, as you've already mentioned.
Yeah, she's incredibly confident, and I think she obviously really wants to do. She's passionate about doing it and stuff, and I think she's actually going to be really interesting in terms of what she does and how she develops, really. And and I think Hardy initially, how am I going to do this to by the end of it, and also that bit where you mentioned when someone walking in, this young woman walking in who was a library member, had been in that library before and stuff, but she is there with 3 adults who she doesn't know and who she hasn't met. But by the end of it, she was going off with Alexis to pick books and do this, that, and the other. So she'd really actually got to know us a bit more. Could see that there was a conversation happening, and so from that point where I thought, ooh, it could all fall to bits of hits, it actually ended up being something quite positive, well, very positive actually by the end of it. Yeah. I was really impressed with her actually, I thought she was fantastic.
So Akala found Mariam passionate, engaging, and incredibly knowledgeable. She is obviously a very gifted young woman who is particularly concerned with humanity. Identity was a very big issue for her, and she seems to be wrestling with it on a daily basis, especially among her peers, who she feels associate being educated and writing poetry with being white and middle class, and are only too happy to let her know that. She was perceptive enough to see that these comments stem from her friends' insecurity rather than them actually believing that being uneducated is something to aspire to. All in all, despite her initial shyness, Mariam was confident, forward-thinking and very mature. Her poetry is adult both in content and use of language, and she is somebody that Akala has great hopes for and I'm delighted to have met. We agreed that she will compose a collection of poems centred around the theme of identity and inspired by classic writing from around the globe. That was Akala. Yes. Did you go to that session?
That's the reason I couldn't go to Leicester, because it was really difficult. But Mariam was kind of overwhelmed. I mean, I have to admit, show my ignorance here. I didn't know who Carla was until I kind of got involved with the project. But Mariam knew exactly who he was. She'd already, when she met him, she was almost like Gaga, like a proper fan. I said, Mariam, did you know who Carla was prior to the session? She said, hell yes, I've got him on my iPod. So she'd been downloading his albums and his poetry and his rap. So I think the fact that we linked them together has worked out really well, because I had no idea that she knew he existed and vice versa. So. And I think the author
Get with it.
I was getting all excited. I kind of was fantastic. I was like, I felt really bad thinking, oh my god, I should have known who you were, and I didn't. And you asked for this autograph. Well, I will later. My new best friend, but they're organising a fantastic author event on the 1st of Feb, and we're going to work with young people. Because I think that whole 17 to 25 age bracket is quite a hard to reach audience in terms of reading and literature. But we're going to link up in Birmingham with a previous Young Poet Laureate in Birmingham, Matt Windle and Akala, and open it up to young people because we've made a connection through the project with the youth offending team, and they're really interested in working with Akala and saying that would be one way the young kids would get involved with poetry, reading, literature. So Mariam was kind of overwhelmed, that was the word, very excited, because it was also Eid that day. And I was like, oh, I'm really sorry, because I hadn't realised Eid was going to fall on the day we planned the session. And she said, I don't care what day it is. I'm so glad, I've got Akala. So she would have come regardless of what day it was. So I think it was a really, really good session. But she's not uploaded any work, so she'll be getting a nagging phone call from you on today.
No, I don't think she has actually.
No, she signed up on the group, but she hasn't uploaded any work. So.